Welcome back to the Unwritten Rule. Today is Sunday, December 8th. And oh my God. Payton, Kenny, Payton's buzzing on the YouTube if you're watching. Missouri beats number one Kansas 76 to 67. Excuse me. We're recording this just like a couple minutes after the game ended. Holy shit, that's my first prompt. Go. I can't believe what I just saw. Missouri knocks off number one. Tigers storm the court. Unfreaking believable, you guys.
2 years ago, this game came to Mizzou Arena. Mizzou was unbeaten, and there was so much energy, and Mizzou got played off the floor. Like it and made everyone wonder, does Dennis Gates really get this rivalry? And he said all the right things leading up to this game, but you had to see it. And from the opening tip, it was so evident that this team was ready to go. I mean, they led from the U16 forward after fall, like they were behind 2-0 and never were behind again. Tamar Bates, I mean, last year you look at the numbers, it wasn't like a great game for him, but you could tell he understood that rivalry a bit with all the energy he was bringing. Holy shit, was he? I don't even know how to describe his performance in this game. I said it to you guys like in a group chat, and I truly believe like Tamar Bates is not a guy that's going to get his number retired by Missouri. He's not going to go down as like one of the all-time great players. But Tamar Bates, when you talk about like past Missouri basketball seasons, like he is going to be one of the first two people I always bring up as like one of my favorite players. Played with literal like endless energy from wire to wire. He played. He made 9 of 15. He had 29 points. Made all 9 of his free throws. The dude had the wind knocked out of him with less than 2 minutes left and got up and sank 2 huge free throws. That's to me the big story of the game. Tamar Bates absolutely showed up and showed out. Nobody else on the court could touch him. It was his game. It was Missouri's. It was just Missouri's day when it was all said and done.
Yeah, these guys came out and realized it, realized what this one meant to a lot of them. And I think having guys on the team that are from the Kansas City area, from Missouri, from Kansas, really helped a lot. You saw a lot of energy. I mean, Aiden Shaw's dunk there at the beginning of the game, Mark Mitchell having a good day, Tamar Bates as well. And Tamar mentioned that in the postgame post-game conversation he had with the broadcasters. He's like, I wanted to come to Mizzou and make it a better place than, when he got here. And I think he's doing that. I think he's taking that right step this year. I mean, it was hard that they had that step backwards last year, even with a closer game against Kansas. But this was huge just for everyone on that team. And I think they all kind of realized it. I think the culture is just so much different. And it's so evident this year how much tighter that group is and how much just stronger it is, especially with these younger guys. I mean, Anthony Robinson is a sophomore. He's a captain. I mean, I wouldn't even call him a captain in training, just the way he's playing right now. The physicality, they came out, they didn't do that like nameless, faceless opponent thing that some teams do. They recognized, who Kansas was, recognized how much this game meant to them. Kansas coming off a pretty brutal loss to Creighton, and Mizzou just put it right back at them.
Yeah, Kenny, you talked about that before the game of, what kind of Kansas team are we going to get? Is it going to get a team that, is angry? And we'll get into them in a second. But yeah, I mean, I think that's such a big thing is the way Dennis has grown into this rivalry and how he is straight up saying, yeah, look, we know how much this game matters to our players, to our staff, our fans. And they went out and damn it, they showed it. And just like, I mean, they had such a nice game plan with the exception of the empty streak in the second half that allowed Kansas to kind of come back, but they played with a clear identity. They played with a clear game plan, and there's just some dogs on this team. Anthony Robinson is going to, go down if he like keeps going. I mean, he's going to go down as one of my favorite Missouri players ever. He was electric in this game. And I mean, to get into like just how they did it a little bit, to me, like I started to notice it, it was Missouri early playing good, good defense. And I think getting to the lane and taking what Kansas gave them to start and helped open up a really big hole. But Kansas, my God, talk about a team that didn't show up for a rivalry game. I mean, it was embarrassing for most of it. I mean, they started to come back in, and, we can talk about that. There was some things Missouri did that wasn't great, but I mean, this was clear as day. One team cared about this game a lot more, and one team was awake. That's probably the best word I can use. Kansas was sleepwalking through the early couple minutes of this.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were saying. Mizzou came out and they made it their brand of basketball immediately from the jump. I mean, this was Mizzou saying, okay, we got to get the crowd into it. We got to play our frantic defense. We got to get them into turnovers. We got to get to the line. They did all of those things. The crowd was unbelievable, by the way. I was kind of taking shots at it over the weekend because it took a while for a sellout to get announced for the border war, but credit to whoever was there. I mean, that was a great atmosphere. Missouri was forced. It wasn't just Kansas being sloppy. I mean, Missouri was legitimately, you could tell Kansas was not responding well to how aggressive Mizzou was playing. I mean, Mizzou was getting to the line like they have all year. It was the formula we had seen from them to win their first 7 games coming into the year. And I mean, you said it, Nolan. At a certain point, it does fall on Kansas. I mean, you look at Hunter Dickinson, he had 19 and 14, but I'm telling you, he was not good in this game. I mean, 7 turnovers for him, 3 turnovers from Dejuan Harris. That is unbelievable when you consider how he played against Missouri in the previous 2 games in this series. 4 turnovers from Zeke Mayo, 3 from KJ Adams. KJ Adams was a non-factor for almost all of this game because he had 3 fouls on him by the time the first half was over. Pretty much everyone on Missouri deserves credit for that. Tamar Bates had 5 steals. I think Ant had 5 steals.
Yep.
I'm also going to throw a shout out to Josh Gray. That was a move that I think kind of split the fan base when he first came in, but he has given Missouri everything they could have ever hoped for. Really what they've been missing under Dennis Gates, a guy that is going to go sit in the paint, really contain a big guy, and just swallow up rebounds. He had like 10 rebounds today. He did a great job on Dickinson. I don't think you look at the numbers for Dickinson, you may not agree with that. I thought he was excellent today. I was really impressed by Josh Gray. I was really impressed by Missouri's defense for most of the day. I thought the game plan was to do what they had been doing pretty much the entire time under Dennis Gates, be a super hyper aggressive team on both ends, get out on the run and transition, and it worked. Kansas had no idea how to respond until it was far too late.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that we wanted to see frustration early on. I think if you were a Mizzou fan, you wanted to see Mizzou kind of get under the skins, chirp a little bit. It's not just a regular game. You're going to have that energy and that swagger to you. And I think they did that early on. I think you got under Hunter Dickinson's skin a little bit, probably not as much as you probably expected when you look at some of these other games he's played this season. But at the same time, it was just that physicality, I think, was probably the biggest thing that was kind of like that motivator, and also just what kind of controlled the momentum early on for Mizzou. You saw a lot of guys just driving to the lane, especially Anthony Robinson. I want someone to do like a deep feature on Anthony Robinson soon, just about like what this past offseason looked like, just like every step. Because I mean, the kid is a different player than last year, and he's probably one of the best guards in the SEC right now. And he's a sophomore, and he's coming off a pretty rough freshman year when we had expectations for him. Even though he wasn't like a really highly regarded recruit, he was still a good recruit and had flashes early on. But it's been an incredible start for him. I think near the end of the game, you probably saw some guys wanting to play a little bit of hero ball. Tony Perkins taking some shots that you weren't really wanting, even some of those ones that he was driving to the lane that if he made them, I mean, yeah, go for it. If you can do that. Still looks like he's battling that leg injury. He fouled to get himself out of the game and then was holding his left leg. But I mean, even with him, even with the experienced guard down, Anthony Robinson has just been phenomenal.
Yeah, the defense with Bates and how he scores, and then Robinson and how he just kind of, I mean, he can do some scoring himself and can play a facilitator. If you add the defense, like Payton said, both of them had 5 steals. I mean, that is a really, really good guard tandem that you have as you head into SEC play. And I completely agree with you, Kenny, about the energy and the physicality. They were absolutely fired up. I mean, Kansas, I remember at one point, I think it was Hunter Dickinson made a three, and he just was kind of going like this to his guys, and like no one really seemed responsive. They didn't seem to have, they just didn't match Missouri's energy, and that helped, ultimately seal the game. Anthony Robinson, too, to build off of that, I too would like to read something deep about how he's grown. The biggest steal, there was the one late where he ran behind Dickinson, while Kansas was coming back and punched the ball out. That to me was, I look back on that as a really, really huge play. Payton mentioned the free throws. That was the thing we talked about pregame. Kansas, 9 for 11 from the free throw line. Missouri, 26 of 31. This isn't just a team that goes to the line a lot. It's a team that makes a lot of free throws. Josh Gray, 20% free throw shooter on the season, drilling 2 clutch free throws. Peyton's resident freshman guy, Marcus Allen, came in with like 3 minutes left in this game, played good defense, hit a couple of free throws.
Huge free throws.
Yeah.
My God. I mean, the game, it was like a 5-point game at the time.
So big free throws all around. And then, they didn't foul Kansas too much, but they still made things physical for Hunter Dickinson, for KJ Adams. KJ Adams has torn this Missouri team apart in some of these games.
Last year he had like 30 almost.
Yeah, and the guy Missouri did exactly what it needed to. It drew him into foul trouble on defense and walled up against him and didn't foul on offense. I mean, it was spectacular. I really applaud just Dennis's game plan. I'd also like your thoughts too. I'm gonna like the rotation. I thought was really, really cleaned up. I mean, Robinson, Bates, Perkins, Mitchell, and Gray, the starters, all 30+ minutes. No one else played more than 11. Aiden Shaw had 11, 2 points, and was +6 in that span. So, that to me was nice too. It was a game that you needed to rely on your starters, on your best players, and I thought all of them stepped up. And it was, aside from I'm sure Payton's going to mention it, a T.O. Barrett appearance randomly at the end of the game. Dennis wasn't really doing anything super goofy with the lineups, which I thought was good.
No, I thought legitimately in the first half, I thought Dennis Gates was perfect. Like he brought in Aiden Shaw when it made sense, and Aiden Shaw gave them really good minutes. All 11, I swear to you, all 11 of Aiden Shaw's minutes, you felt him on the floor.
Yeah, he had 2 points, but he had the best 2 points, didn't he?
Yeah, he had an electric 2 points. Again, Aiden Shaw does not stuff the stat sheet, but he's on the floor. He is so I cannot say enough about how good he has looked this year. He's really, really, I think Dennis Gates really challenged him to be more active when he's out there, and I think he's taken it to heart because he is flying everywhere on the court. It is so nice to watch Aiden Shaw. And I again, like you said, Knowlton, Dennis Gates had his best 5 play 30+ minutes, and that 6th guy off that bench based on the minutes was Aiden Shaw, and I thought that was the correct decision. Aiden Shaw gave them great minutes. I thought Payton Marshall, the 4 minutes he was in, he had that, he wasn't ready to be an offensive contributor in a game like this. I liked both of his fouls, though. That was a lot of the fouls that Missouri had in this game were good, hey, this is our brand of basketball. You're not dictating the style of this game. They were physical with Kansas. They were jawing Kansas after some of these. Ant Robinson had a physical foul on Dejuan Harris in the first half and started barking right at Hunter Dickinson afterwards. I mean, and again, yes, in the second half, Dennis, when the game was starting to kind of get a little out of control, threw in T.O. Barrett. I didn't need to see that. I really didn't need to see T.O. Barrett. T.O. Barrett, I think, can be a good player. He's honestly given them more than I thought we were going to see from him this year. But no, I agree. I actually thought the rotations were pretty clean this game. For the most part, they all made sense. And most of them paid off with at least some sort of contribution.
It was one of the more tighter rotations we've seen in a while, and I think the staff moved in these guys at optimal times too to make sure that the best 5 are on the floor and on the floor with energy, playing 30+ minutes. Not having a guy that's close to 20 off your bench isn't something that we've seen from Mizzou in the past couple of years, but it's also been something we've seen from Dennis where he gets the best guys on the floor. It does take me back to that Wichita State game, with Kobe. Of course, you don't have a guy like Kobe on the floor right now. It's not like he sat Mark Mitchell for most of the second half, but he kept his right guys on the floor, and I think that was just something that it was just a huge step forward. I think in this game coming into it, I think we were all kind of in the boat that Mizzou has an opportunity to probably keep this one close. Don't really believe that Mizzou will pull out a win, but it felt like we just saw like everything kind of come together the last couple of years in this one. And, credit to Dennis, credit to that staff for how they kind of put this rotation together. Even guys like Marcus Warwick, who's had, big strides this year, just only played 8 minutes and didn't score any points. And he's a guy that, we thought, even Jack has mentioned him as like a Dejuan Gordon. He can take that shot if you need him to. They didn't really need him today. It's just I like that from this team, that there are opportunities there where some guy's going to step up, but you're not going to need him every single game.
Yeah, it was just, like, I don't even, like, Marquez Warwick, 0 points, 2 field goal attempts. Like, you're going to get more from him in bigger games this year. I thought the minutes balance was excellent. I thought the game plan for the most part was excellent. We could touch quickly on, it wasn't all perfect. This team was up by 24 points at one point in this game, still managed to win it. But that middle part, that's the only, my one critique, if we're really nitpicking, is, you got away from, I didn't think they changed sort of the tempo or anything in the second half during that run, but they, seemed to lean away from scoring. It was kind of just a lot of dribbling around, moving the ball, but not looking for shots. It was just wasting time, which wasn't too great.
Yeah, I mean, look, and you have to remember, they were not playing like UAPB. They were not playing Cal even. This was the number 1 team in the country. This was Kansas. You knew at some point there was going to be a run. I was honestly really happy it took as long as it did for it to get going for Kansas. Now, yes, the middle, like Mizzou went like a good 5 minutes without scoring. Kansas went on, I remember it was a 19-5 run over a 10-minute stretch. That ain't good. Like, Missouri, I totally agree, Knowlton. It wasn't, they kind of just got out of what was working. They didn't try and play as frantic on defense, taking those risks to force turnovers, get out in transition. And Missouri, I mean, is just not as good in the half court. That's just how it is. I also I didn't like that guys were just settling for shots, in the first half. Mark Mitchell and Tamar Bates, and they were all like charging with reckless abandon to get to the free throw line. And they didn't do that in the middle of the second half. They kind of settled for some bad mid-ranges, some 3-pointers. But by the end of the game, I mean, it got cut to 2. Mark Mitchell made a huge 3, and then I noticed a couple times they got back to that aggressiveness on defense, and Tamar Bates was taking huge gambles to try and come up with a huge steal, and they weren't generating turnovers, but I think it legitimately does affect the psyche of Kansas, where you're almost rushing a shot because you're afraid someone's going to fly in and steal the ball from you. So I mean, I wouldn't be mad if I was a Mizzou fan that Mizzou almost blew a 24-point lead. They wound up winning against their most hated rival ever in a game that I think should unanimously restore confidence in the direction this program is going.
Yeah, you can't apologize for a win against the number 1 team in the country. You have an opportunity to jump in the AP top 25 after this, too, just with how you're playing in these past couple games. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I think you stepped off the gas a little bit if you're Missouri. And I don't know if that comes down to a lot of guys playing 30-plus minutes, not having too much off the bench, or just kind of oh, this game's getting close. Time is ticking away. Let's keep clicking. Let's keep ticking on that clock. It felt like just a quick change there. And then they kind of got back to who they were in those last couple of minutes and last, minute 30. But this game, it does remind me of a game of a couple years ago. Different, circumstances of where these teams were, where the program kind of stood. It was in Konza Martin's final year, and the roster then wasn't like this roster. It did not have as much talent. It had a lot of castaways from other schools, a lot of guys, trying to get back to the Power 5 level. And it was against Auburn. I mean, that was the number 1 team in the country. Students, I mean, the whole stadium was packed this time around. Of course, it was Kansas. That Auburn game, I mean, the student section was packed to the brim. It was an unbelievable experience, but Mizzou just couldn't pull it out. And I think this is one of those things where Mizzou basketball hasn't had the best runs. They made it to the tournament a couple of times, since we've been students in the past 5 to 6 years. But you just didn't see a game finish like this in a while. And I think that's where I keep going back to the culture. We've had Ben Sternberg on here who's seen it firsthand at 2 different schools. He's given us, the ins and outs. Jack's been around the team for a whole season. He's seen it firsthand, especially in the first year. There's just something different about this team, I think. I think that Memphis game was a true eye opener about how you can't let things get away from you. You can't go back to what it was last season. And I think this team is just taking a step in the right direction, not just in the play, but just knowing each other. One of the things we've always pointed to, it maybe takes time, is like, oh, these guys are new to each other. It's their first season. They're not going to be around each other too long. I just feel like these guys have known each other for years. I just think that this has been a huge development for Mizzou, and I just hope it doesn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, it's a well-bonded group, no doubt about it. I'll note this too. It was very funny. There was a couple shots in this game, particularly from Mark Mitchell, and then there was the one from Josh Gray, which ended up being called a 2. I didn't even realize that his 3 was called a 2.
Get smaller shoes.
Yeah, it's the Kevin Durant thing. Dennis said afterward, I just saw this from on Twitter. Dennis Gates said the rule for Josh Gray is if he gets 10 rebounds, he can shoot a 3. Said he was very upset that the 3 was called a 2. So
that was like their second make in like 6 minutes too. So
4 for 13 from 3 and won the game. I mean, pretty remarkable.
They're not taking any threes without Grill. I mean, it really has been like a dry spell. And Tamar made 2 of them. Ant made like that long one that beat the buzzer.
Ant made 1, Tamar made 2, Mitchell made 1.
I do think Mitchell is worth mentioning here because he was a bit up and down. In the first half, he only went 1 for 5, but he got to the line a lot. In the second half, I mean, there were a lot of bad shots being taken. But at the end of the day, they brought Mark Mitchell in because they believe he can be a player that can help them, that really can be the guy to go out and win them a game like this when it's close. And when when it was all starting to build towards Kansas about to take the lead, Mitchell hit like hit a 3-pointer to put the lead back to 5, and then he made it to the line. He made 2 more trips to the line. It was not a great day for Mark Mitchell. I mean, he went like 4 for 14. He'll have better nights than that, but I do think overall he made some pretty big plays down the stretch for Missouri to win this game. Not even just on the offensive end, but he had a huge block, like when Kansas was like frantically trying to chip away at the deficit again. He was pulling in boards. So overall, up and down day, but I think you can be pretty happy with how Mark Mitchell finished this game.
Absolutely electric. Retire everyone's number from this game. Just put it up in the rafters. A small banner just dedicated to the first. I mean, it's the first border war they've won since joining the SEC. It comes after a season they go 0-19 in conference play. I mean, and Kansas, I get they lost the game before. They're the number 1 team in the country. I mean, this is unbelievable. This is one of those things, I think, and I'll let y'all get your, final thoughts, but this is one of those things for me that, like, this is a program-changing win. I think Kenny said a lot of good stuff about that. This is a win that installs a lot of confidence. And, it feels like a win that this team is going to build off. This isn't a Missouri team that has limped out of the gate and lucked into a victory. I mean, they haven't played too many good teams, but man, there are a lot of good things emerging about this team. Obviously, we talked about some of the players, some of their tendencies with scoring and free throw shooting, and even defense. Like, they'd been winning all these games. They were leading the country in scoring coming into this. And, they only score 76 points, but they hold the number 1 team in the country to 67. I think there's just a lot of positive trends. And I mean, we're giving kind of our instant reactions here, but I think the longevity of this game, and we're going to have some more feelings later on as the season goes, just how meaningful this is, regardless of how the rest of this year goes. But that's kind of my final thing. I'm just, I'm shocked in the best way. I love it. I loved seeing everybody storm the court. I saw it was graded a 9 out of 10 court storm by Ryan Hammer, who's a big
9.6
out of 10. Yeah.
Sorry. He's a big basketball Twitter guy. So I appreciated that. Amazing. If you guys have any just last things.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think If you're, I think it'd be a little foolish to not like be pretty confident that this thing is headed in the right direction now. Look, the SEC is quite literally like the greatest conference ever, like this year for no reason really, but it
45 and
is.
15, the conference.
Yeah,
is
just a
this year.
ridiculous conference. So a lot is still out in front of Missouri. It's not like this isn't a ticket puncher by any stretch, but boy, man, if you even go like 500 in conference play, you got bragging rights coming up as well. I think you're sitting pretty right now. I mean, even if it doesn't result in an NCAA tournament berth, that is, I agree, a program changer. Like that's proof. Like on any given day, this program is good enough to go out and beat Kansas. And if you can beat Kansas, you can beat anybody. So I'm not going to count Missouri out of anything. I do think that this team is really, it's got something to it. It's flawed, but there's something to it. Hopefully Caleb Grill can come back and mix in well.
Yeah, no Caleb Grill.
Because the ceiling on this team, I think, is pretty high.
Yeah, my last thing is, I've only been around Mizzou culture, just the Mizzou fan base and everything like that since probably like 2017. So I have like 7 years of experience. But I think across like a bunch of sports, you've seen like the Mizzou, the teams that, get so close to that win. And it takes me back to the Auburn game, like I mentioned. But this was just like one of those things where I think you finally get over the hump. The football team did it in 2023 with some of those wins. And I think this is where it's a good turning point for this basketball program. After just, such a shocking first season under Dennis Gates, no one really expected that, to just, all expectations were out the door in that second year. So this is just a monumental step forward under Dennis Gates and just kind of where this rivalry kind of goes forward. Made a joke to you guys that I think Bill Self will pull a Drinkwitz play next year at the Sprint Center, at the T-Mobile Center, and shake Dennis's hand and say, "We stand on business, Dennis." Because I don't know. He didn't look too pleased when Dennis, let him off the court there a little bit early, calling that timeout. But at the same time, it was a good move by Dennis Gates. That's just who he is. That's just the guy you're going to have. But yeah, going back to that court storming, we were never a part of one, and there's been a court storm and a field storm since we graduated from the University of Missouri.
So jealous.
Unbelievable.
Very, very
jealous. It always happens right after you leave. But I hope those fans had a blast on the court. I hope anyone, if you were watching this and you were there, like Kenny said, the fan base, it's the best fan base in the country, no doubt about it. And this rivalry kind of encapsulates that, and the hatred. I love the timeout that, like, ultimately I think is seen as a nice thing, like to Dennis to do, to try and get his guys, make sure they're not stormed. But at the same time, I love it as like a spin zone disrespect, like, get off my court. We own you type deal. I love it. What a win. Mizzou beats Kansas. Those are just some of our thrown together thoughts. We're going to have a show. We'll record and post one on Monday for you with some football stuff. We'll talk about the bowl game, but we just wanted to get our reactions dumped out there for you guys, and enjoy the win right there with you, because it was spectacular to watch. I love this team. I can't wait to see how the rest of the season goes. And fuck KU. See you later.